As a parent, you know the moment that I'm talking about. The moment where your kid is covering their ears in a noisy environment, or they get overstimulated and have a meltdown in the grocery store. They're fighting the clothing, the textures, the tags, the things on their socks. They reach their point of sensory overload. And a lot of times these issues, these concerns are dismissed as more of a behavioral issue, or you're just told that your kid will grow out of it eventually. But what I really want to do is help understand that neurological basis, is understand what is going on in your kid's nervous system that is leading to these challenges. I think understanding that, getting to that root level, will allow you to understand how do we help, right? If you understand the cause, you can get to lasting solutions and really getting relief instead of just trying to walk on eggshells and hope that there's not another meltdown or not another tantrum. So that's what this video is for. Parents, if you are dealing with those sort of issues, please listen in. Regardless of whether your kid's got an ADHD, an autism, or any sort of label or diagnosis, if they're feeling overstimulated, if they're feeling like they're challenged by the sensory processing overload that is going on in day-to-day life, listen in, because I want to dig into how we can address the root cause for that. And that sensory processing word really is a good term to describe what's happening with kids in this situation. I don't really love all the labels and the diagnoses that we're giving kids these days, right? It's one of the things we talk about at our Perfect Storm workshop. But what I think does properly describe what kids are dealing with is that sensory label, because as much as we look at these as outward behavior concerns, right? The outbursts, the tantrums, the whatever the external thing is, sometimes it's a lack of an external thing, right? They're so sensory overloaded that they're not doing something, they're not responding, they're just shut down. Regardless of what the behavior piece is, really it starts as a sensory input, right? We gotta start thinking of this in the reverse order. The outputs are only a result of the input. So if we correct the sensory input, if we correct the nervous system's processing, all of the outputs, the behavior side of it, are gonna change as well. So that's what's going on. We gotta understand that this is a sensory issue first, right? Step one is understanding this is, you can kind of think of it as a traffic jam neurologically, right? Our brain is processing and taking in more than it should, or inaccurate information. You might have heard of the word proprioception if you're in this perfect storm journey, if you've got a kid struggling with these things. Proprioception is just your body's self-awareness. It's the ability to see where it is in space. And what happens in normal everyday life, we've got these sensors, we've got these receptors all over our body that is feeding the brain that good info. Unfortunately, if it's not doing that job properly, if we don't have a good sensory awareness feedback loop, instead of good brain food, we are being bombarded with alarm bells. We are being bombarded with SOS signals, and it creates this heightened stress response in kids. I think of it as, instead of a quiet, calm atmosphere here, wherever you are, think of it as Metallica's blaring from the ceiling as loud as possible. You're not gonna be able to focus. It's gonna be hard to regulate, and it's gonna create all these other impacts, right? That's what a kid is dealing with. They're sitting in math class and they're trying to focus and they're just overwhelmed with input. You're going through day-to-day life and you ask one more thing of them, their system is so triggered and so activated that it pushes them over the edge. And what that's really talking about is the autonomic nervous system and our ability to process stressors, right? There's these two different modes. I want to walk you through these two different aspects of our nervous system. You'll hear us talk about it as the gas pedal versus the brake pedal. The fancy words for that is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system within that autonomic branch. The gas pedal is your fight or flight. That is your stress response. That fight or flight mode is appropriate if you are truly in a survival mode situation, but if we get stuck here when we're not, that brake pedal, that wellness side of our neurology gets turned off, right? We are stuck in fight or flight all the time. So that brake versus gas pedal balance is everything. Our gut health, our digestion, our immune system, everything is gonna be related to this interplay. So what we see in these situations, that overstimulation, that sensory bombardment, major gas pedal trigger, right? It puts that kid into a fight or flight stressed out state, which is gonna have all sorts of other consequences, right? They're not gonna be digesting well. Maybe constipation, belly, gut issues are gonna be an issue, skin and allergies and eczema. But then they're also gonna struggle sleeping. They're gonna struggle with an immune system. They're gonna get sick more often. They're gonna have more of those food sensitivities. They're gonna have this downward spiraling of concerns that are all created by one underlying condition, right? And that's one of the underlying messages I want you to take away from this, parents, is that as much as you might look at the challenges your kid is dealing with and look at them as separate, isolated things, it's probably all connected, right? I think in that traditional model, healthcare likes to play, the specialist merry-go-round or symptom whack-a-mole, where you're just looking at these as isolated things instead of looking at what is this kid dealing with and how can we just help them function as they're designed to, right? If they're having all these struggles, there's some sort of underlying neurological issue at play, because that's the system of the body that touches everything else. So we have kids shifting into that gas pedal mode, and unfortunately it's starting way too early for them. A lot of the case histories that we see with these sort of kids, we're digging into the early, preconception, pregnancy, birth process, and that mom maybe was stuck in fight or flight from day one. Maybe there was pregnancy stress. The birth process itself is oftentimes traumatic, with either a C-section or vacuum extraction or forceps as the worst of it. But even, the induction process, getting in, needing an epidural, and then being out of sync and not in tune with your body's own rhythms is going to create all sorts of consequences, which ends up as more force, more stress on baby. Specifically this upper neck here, when we're talking about the gas versus brake balance, our brake pedal is primarily coming from the vagus nerve coming out of the base of our skull. So if we're pulling a baby out at their head and neck, if we have this fragile, tiny little infant that we're putting physical stress in that brainstem region, we're gonna majorly screw up, to put it scientifically. We're gonna majorly mess up that regulation, because our brake pedal, that regulation side of our nervous system, isn't going to be able to function properly. So if this is your kid, you're probably seeing one who has immune struggles. They probably have physical symptoms like low energy, maybe headaches and that discomfort, nausea sometimes is a part of it. They have trouble focusing and regulating. They have trouble just handling changes, right? Unpredictability in their environment is the worst, because a lot of times they're often at rest at their baseline on this 0 to 10 scale here. They might be at a 6, 7, 8 out of 10. And so you tell them no, they have a change in schedule, something goes off, and all of a sudden we're going from, maybe just treading water to breaking point. And that's where parents will say, we got to walk on eggshells, and we really are teetering on the brink of a meltdown at any given point in time. So that is not what we want for our kids. That's not what we want for you, mom and dad, because that affects the whole family, right? Siblings, your relationship, all of the above. So what do? We got to find where that stress is. We have to measure and assess, how is our nervous system processing and handling this? That is where our scans are a huge part of our clinical care and outcomes, is we want to check in on that very first visit, see how are we handling life? And then as we go throughout care, check in along the way and see what's changing, what's different. Are we on the right path, or do we need to call an audible or change something up along the way? So that's what I would encourage you, guys. If you feel like you've done other things, if you feel like you're making progress, but you're still stuck and you're dealing with what we might have underneath that sensory or that overstimulation umbrella, let us help, and let us at least find out if we can help, right? That's what that step one process is doing those scans, measuring the nervous system, and seeing if that's what's going on for your kids. See if that is a piece of the story, so we can actually start addressing the cause instead of just managing the symptoms, right? Because when your kid has the emotional issues, when they have the focus issues, yeah, sometimes there are medication interventions, but I've never met a kid with ADHD who, thinks that their ADHD is caused by a deficiency of Ritalin or Concerta or whatever they're taking, right? It's not actually fixing anything. It's probably going to help manage the symptoms. Best case scenario, it's helping, bring some peace and some calm there, but it's not the why. We got to get to the why. Hope that helps. Please send us a message if you've got questions or thoughts. Reach out if you want to schedule something. The team will be happy to chat through all that with you and answer any questions or concerns you got. See you soon.